Peace and welcome to Atlantis Build Talk Radio, the premier station for 5% Nation of Gods and Earth social commentary, interviews, musicology, and uncensored discussions about the science of everything in life. This station is a subsidiary of Asia and the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters at www.atlantischool.blogspot.com and Asia TV at YouTube/Quanaya. Quanah. Peace and welcome to another edition of Atlantis Build Talk Radio. I'm your host, SaladinAllah. In today's episode, I wanted to build about today's degree. Before I get into that, I wanted to just bring everybody up to speed on what's been going on in my cipher. Some of you may not be aware, but a few months back, I went through a very tragic and traumatic experience. I lost my old dad and one of my siblings, my brother, who's a year younger than me and also a twin, on the same day, hours apart, under two entirely different circumstances. My old dad, he died in his sleep and he left here with congestive heart failure. And my younger brother, he left here violently. He was murdered. And for this to happen just hours apart, it's been very difficult to process and unpack. And I'm still going through the grieving process. I know it's going to be some time for me to really process and unpack this. And, you know, it's been very difficult. One of the things that I have done is I've taken somewhat of a social media sabbatical. And I haven't been as engaged online as I have customarily been. I'm still consistently sharing, you know, articles and keeping people updated on the various different projects, programs, and initiatives I'm involved in. But aside from that, I haven't really been as engaged. And one of the things that I've learned from this experience is I've grown in terms of my emotional intelligence. And I feel very raw in a sense where there's a level of sensitivity that I now have to various different experiences that are outside of me. And it's new for me. It's challenging. Some you may not know, but I have various different pets. My pets are exotic pets. I don't just have like a dog, right? I have various different type of pets. One of my pets I have is a Goliath bird-eating spider. And if you've never seen one before, take a moment and go on YouTube and look up Goliath bird-eating spider. And that's exactly what I have. It's huge. And during this experience of me going through these losses of my family, my spider was going through a molting process, and molting is basically it growing out of its skin. It was very unique to see it because the process is the spider flips over on its back and their legs are sprawled out and it literally looks dead. Literally. For like a day or so. And you're not supposed to touch it because it's in a very, very, very sensitive state. But after about a day, you start to see it moving and a new spider emerges out of the exoskeleton underneath. And this new spider does not have an exoskeleton. It usually has a very transparent appearance because it's very sensitive and raw. And it takes time, depending upon the size of the spider, for its new skin or its new exoskeleton to harden. That is a time period in the process where you're not supposed to touch it at all because it's very, very sensitive during that time. And I watched my spider go through this process, and that's exactly how I felt and how I still feel. You know, I've been very sensitive to a lot of things that prior to this experience of going to my father's home and meeting the coroner there and seeing my father's physical there, And then hours later, receiving a phone call that my brother was murdered, and then me getting to the murder scene and identifying his body with the coroner there. Death, violence, health, it's really made me look at it in a different perspective because of how close it is to me. So I had to take a social media break, especially with people constantly sharing violence and death, and it's just been very, very difficult for me, especially just going through this experience. So in this time, I've also invested in a lot of self-care that I've neglected over the times. I'm usually working, and I'm always doing things for other people, and I usually never take a break. I never just take time to myself and to just do something for myself. And I've started to do more of that. I've gotten acupuncture. I've done other different things in terms of self-care, and I'm glad that I've made that decision. So even though I'm still going through the grieving process, at the same time I'm healthy. I've gone to the doctors and gotten everything checked out. I'm strong, and I'm thankful to be in a good place, especially after going through such a tragic and traumatic experience. Those of you who've been reaching out to me, and those of you who've continued to support my different projects, programs, and initiatives, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you for all of that and your continued support. And that's where I'm at. So let's get back to what I wanted to build on today. As 5%ers, people typically hear, what's today's mathematics? How do you see today's mathematics? And that's very common in terms of how we interact with one another. People usually don't hear, or it's not as common for you to hear a person say, what's today's degree, or how do you see today's degree? Now, when a person's asking you, how do you see today's mathematics? Today's mathematics is basically the principles that correspond to the date. So today, for example, is the 17th. 17 in our supreme mathematics is knowledge, God. So if someone were to ask you, how do you see today's mathematics? You would say, I see today's mathematics as knowledge, God, all drawn up to, or all being born to, build or destroy. And all being drawn up to or all being born to is just nothing more than saying 1 and 7 equals 8, or knowledge God equals build or destroy. It's the exact same thing. Once you manifest what today's mathematics is, you take a moment and share your understanding of those principles and how they function in your life. So when we're building with one another as 5%ers, that's no different than scientists sharing their research for peer review amongst their colleagues. That's simply what it is. And it's a way of us ensuring that our interactions with one another are quality interactions, and that those interactions are an asset to one another and not liabilities. In other words, when you come in contact with another 5%er, you should be leaving with something. You should be able to identify something you learned that you can quantify in terms of your growth and development. It's something that you should be able to carry away with you. That wasn't just a interaction that had no meaning or no substance to it. So when we ask each other, how do you see today's mathematics? That is a substantive question. You're engaging one another from the perspective of being an asset to each other. So today's mathematics is pretty common. You hear that and you see it in YouTube videos often. One of the things that you don't see as much is 5%ers asking each other, how do you see today's degree? Now, what's different about what's today's degree is today being the 17th, instead of just saying knowledge God in terms of the mathematics, you reference the 17th degree in different bodies of lessons. So in other words, if someone were to ask me, how do you see today's degree? I would reference the 17th degree or the knowledge God degree in the 1 to 40s, which is what is the meaning of civilization. The protocol or the process is when someone asks you, how do you see today's degree? You recite the degree word for word, the question as well as the answer. Then you share your understanding. It's a little different than today's mathematics because today's degree requires more of a comprehensive build as opposed to the free form that the mathematics allows you to be able to express. What do I mean by that? When you're talking about mathematics as principles, there is a wide array of perspectives that you can share in terms of expounding on the mathematics. When you are expounding on today's degree, that degree or that lesson is very specific. And you have to actually extract the wisdom in order to share your understanding of that lesson. In other words, today being the 17th or knowledge God, when you talk about the knowledge God degree, what is the meaning of civilization? One having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not a savage in the pursuit of happiness. You have to take the elements of that lesson and be able to explain what that means and how it corresponds to knowledge God. So this is an example of how you build on today's degree. It's not the only way that you build on today's degree. This is just an example of my own self-styled wisdom and a way that you can build on that degree to share your understanding in a very practical way. So today's degree is knowledge God, which is what is the meaning of civilization. One having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not a savage in the pursuit of happiness. So one of the primary questions that we have to ask ourselves is, why is this meaningful? What is the benefits of civilization? Because sometimes people may look at this degree and you see it just in everyday life. There's not much of a value for knowledge in this society. Wisdom, understanding, definitely not culture or refinement. And you can just scroll through Twitter or Facebook or any of these other social media apps and just see savages in the pursuit of happiness. So these elements of civilization and why it's important or meaningful is oftentimes not reflected in the society that you see around you. So just pondering this degree puts you in a position or in a place that the average person is not in. So that's the first thing I think that's important to consider, that even asking the question, what is the meaning of civilization, says a lot about a person's attitude and aptitude in terms of growth and development. And that's one of the benefits of all of our degrees. Some of the questions that we learn, that we study and research when it comes to asking ourselves these questions about life, are things that we would have usually never even put thought into, just like 85% of the people that are around us. So now, what is meaningful? What is important about civilization? What's the value in knowledge? Well, knowledge has various different meanings, but the primary meaning of knowledge is awareness or consciousness. The more that you know, the more access you have to wisdom, which is right discernment. It's impossible to rightly discern or judge anything if you don't know nothing first. So that's why knowledge always comes before wisdom, and things are not wisdom knowledge, because that's backwards. How can you make wise decisions and choices if you don't know anything first? So knowledge comes first. That's the proper protocol, and that is just a natural part of life. That's nothing that a person has to learn. You naturally do this. When you look at a child naturally follows the process of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, culture, and refinement. That's growth and development. Now, the main focus is not becoming a savage in the pursuit of happiness. Why? Because happiness, or that sense of joy, or that purposeful life, is uniquely linked to the foundation of knowledge. So when we say knowledge of self, not only are we talking about development in terms of civilization and righteousness, but we're also talking about that natural process that we go through as human beings of accumulating knowledge or becoming more aware so that we can navigate life and make wise decisions, not only with our own bodies and our own destiny, but our relationship to the environment. Knowledge is critical to those wise decisions, which ultimately yields the type of understanding that's required for us to live a cultured life. One of the main things that distinguishes a civil or civilized society from a primitive society is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. The less that a people know, the more foolish that they become, the less that they see and understand, which means their way of life, or the sum total of all their people activities, their culture will be compromised and it won't grow beyond their low brow. So culture gives you access to refinement. What's refinement? Refinement is decorum. It's etiquette. It's social norms or rules and regulations that guide and help govern the interaction of human beings within a society. Refinement is like the thread that holds the moral fabric of a society together. And when you don't see refinement, or you don't see that thread that enables that fabric to remain intact, you start to see the erosion of that society, the human family. All it requires is a cursory glance at past societies and what was their downfall. You start to see that what caused their downfall was an erosion of their morality. The people started to involve themselves in activities that were not sustainable, activities that would be considered acultural or against the continuity of the community and of the people. Now, I don't have to just sit here and make a laundry list of the things that you can just look around and see people doing, or the hedonism that people are involved in, which is nothing more than savagery in the pursuit of happiness. But these are the things that erodes the moral fabric of the society. So we talk about the meaning of civilization. What does it mean? What is the value of it? What is the importance of it? That's what we're talking about. One having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not a savage in the pursuit of happiness. So savage is referenced all the way back in the wisdom degree or in the second degree in the 1 of 14s. Would ask the question, why did Musa have a hard time civilizing the devil near 2000 BC? And the first line of that answer says, because he was a savage. A savage means a person who has lost the knowledge of himself and is living a beast life. So that's why I said that a savage in the pursuit of happiness is intrinsically linked to knowledge being the foundation, or what knowledge itself ultimately is. Because a savage is a person who has lost the knowledge of themselves and is living a beast life. So what does it mean to live a beast life? It's saying that a person that lives a beast life is living on a horizontal plane. They're not living upright. That's one of the things that you often hear from archaeologists when they talk about Cro-Magnon man, or they talk about Neanderthals or some of these other primordial men, that they weren't upright. And it took time for humanity to evolve to an upright species. When you're looking at it symbolically, being upright or living upright means that you're perpendicular. Upright is a 90-degree angle or a right angle. So not only are you standing upright, you're living upright. And when you look at the word righteous or righteous, that's a compound word. It's comprised of right and just, which means true. So there's a connection to all of these various different degrees. You take knowledge God and you draw it up to its highest, knowledge God being build or destroy. You can take that degree knowledge God, which is the meaning of civilization, and draw it up to build or destroy and take it all the way back to the build or destroy degree or the build degree in the 1 to 14s. Why does the devil try to keep our people apart from their own social equality? And it says because he doesn't want us to know how filthy he is in all his affairs. He's afraid when we learn about him, we run from amongst us. Social means to advocate a society, men, a group of men for one common cause. Equality means to be equal in everything. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you are striving to invest in civilization, which you do not see generally reflected in the society, not only do you stand out, but sometimes you put a target on your back. You become like Serpico on a police force. When you come there just to strive to do right, and you got dirty cops looking at you and possibly compromising you or putting you in a life-threatening situation because you look like an internal affairs billboard sign. Some people don't like righteousness around them. So in that degree, when it talks about why does the devil try to keep people apart from their own social equality, social means to advocate a society of men, a group of men for one common cause. Equality means to be equal in everything. That lesson tells you about how if you're on this path of righteousness and you really value the meaning of civilization, which is knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and not being a savage in the pursuit of happiness, some people may not want you around them. They're going to keep you apart from their own social equality because they don't want you to know how filthy they are in all their affairs. And that's how some people are. So you can see the relationship in you investing in learning about the meaning of civilization, and then on the flip side, how some people will start striving to keep you apart from their own social equality or ridicule you because you don't indulge in certain type of substances or you don't go certain places. You know, people will call you a goody two-shoes or act like, hey, you think you better than me and all this other stuff. Nah, the reality of it is they just want to keep you apart from their own social equality because they really don't want you to know how filthy they are in all their affairs. So now that's build or destroy. That's the number 8. Look at the 8th letter in the supreme alphabet, which is H, which is he or her. That is like an addendum. That lets you know that this whole build that I'm having with you in terms of the meaning of civilization and people keeping you apart from their own social equality and all this other stuff, that applies to he or her. It ain't gender specific. People being involved in filthy affairs could be males or females or whatever they want to call themselves. And if you're not down with shit like that, they will strive to keep you apart from their own social equality, which also means you may not have access to certain resources because they may be in a position to control or they may dominate certain type of industries. And if they get down a certain way, and if you're not down with that, then you're not going to be up in their social equality like that. They're going to keep you apart from that. So that's something that you also have to ask yourself the question, how can you navigate these complicated relationships amongst human family members that are involved in certain things that you're not involved in? How do you develop the level of tolerance to be able to manage these difficult relationships or contacts that you have with people that are not involved in the things that you're involved in? It's a difficult question, and it's something that you don't just have a plateau answer to, meaning it's not like you just, oh, this is how you handle that situation. Nah, this is something that you consistently have to learn and you have to adapt to. So that meaning of civilization question, the knowledge God degree, one having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement is not a savage pursuit of happiness. That's something that you have to live out each and every day in each and every way. You're constantly gaining knowledge. You're constantly gaining wisdom, understanding, learning more about your culture and becoming more refined and finding better and more effective ways not to become a savage in the pursuit of happiness. So knowledge God all being drawn up to build or destroy. These are critical components or elements in terms of our duty as civilized people and why we have this culture as the 5%. It's not so that we can be showboating. It's not so that we can ridicule other people and put other people down and talk all sophisticated over people's heads. Nah, we're really stewards or caretakers of the human family as well as the planet. And in a lot of ways, it's a very thankless job. A very thankless job. So one of the things that we learn in this journey is we get accustomed to solitude. We get accustomed to a seldom walk road because it's not crowded over here. You just look around you and you see people being savages in the pursuit of happiness, and being a savage in pursuit of happiness, that's nothing more than being a hedonist, where you're just simply pleasure seeking. And the reason why people do that is because they're ultimately empty inside. And when you have knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and refinement, those 5 elements represents power. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and refinement. That summarizes what power actually is. Not just the truth, but the capacity to actually not only influence those who are around you, but to influence the environment. And there's a natural sense of joy that comes along with that sense of power. You're not out here looking for nothing outside of yourself. You know that you have all that you need and desire. Any and everything else is just an attribute. It's something that just adds on to what you already have. So that's just an example of building on today's degree. And, I could keep going on. I could have taken it to various different other degrees and showed you the correlations with this and what it means. But you just look at the lesson and you extract the wisdom from it and apply it to your everyday life. And the beautiful thing about this, like I mentioned earlier, is as 5%ers, we're scientists sharing our research with our scientific community, with our colleagues. Those of you who are listening to what it is that I'm actually sharing, you can literally take what I said and apply it practically to your life and to get your own results. So I will, this was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educational, and just gave those of you a little bit of insight into what today's degree is. I may take more opportunities to build on today's degree and expound on that as well, and maybe even bring on other guests and do it in real time, just like I'm doing it in real time right now, so that you can get other perspectives on someone else's self-styled wisdom and how they actually break down these lessons and show you some of the practical applications of this culture. Until next time, peace. Please support and share with your networks our Atlantis School Renovation Project. Through a recently acquired property here in the city of Niagara Falls, New York, we are doing renovations to establish an early childhood learning center and after-school program for youth in our city. Despite students of color representing more than half the student population in this country, Black men represent less than 2% of that teacher workforce. So as a Black educator, My voice and presence within the lives of children is critical to combating family dysfunction, juvenile delinquency, and creating an inclusive workforce that ensures that all of our nation's students receive a quality, culturally enriched education, which consists of various projects, programs, and initiatives such as this cool animation series. This is not simply my profession, it is also my passion and my purpose. We would really appreciate your support and sharing this initiative with your networks. Thank you.